Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, there are these multiple ways that we find for escapism from our to get away from the responsibilities of being the whole creatures that we actually are. These, these complex. We are these complex creatures, and we are also even the most self-aware of us, and in some ways especially the most self-aware of us, are experiencing the mystery of ourselves, running into the fact that there's a lot of unknown about myself.
Yeah.
And that's really, really scary and uncomfortable for a lot of people. And it can take a long time to develop a certain level of comfort and even happiness with the mystery of my own being.
Yeah, and I'm glad you kind of brought that up too, because just kind of the mystery of oneself and kind of, how we learn to appreciate ourselves more as we grow older. And it goes along with reframing, like we mentioned earlier. With every new experience, you kind of reframe your own identity and you kind of, learn to grow from that.
Yeah,
And
hopefully.
yeah, yeah, yeah. If you're paying attention, right?
Right.
But just I guess kind of looking at it from that perspective, if we're growing as individuals, it I guess how do we cultivate that desire to want to embrace the mystery, because it's
Mm,
definitely not for everybody, and I feel particularly in today's kind of culture, it's not something that the mainstream wants you to do, right?
no.
The majority of I mean, I wouldn't just say mainstream culture, but every culture wants you to stay within due bounds of its norms. And
Right.
when you start questioning yourself, and you start questioning the system and the morality, and the why the way things are, and how those things how your life circumstances are connected to socio-political circumstances, and you start looking at all these different factors and their impacts on you, like that that gets a lot of people active in certain
Yeah.
things that those in power don't want us to be active in.
Yes. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Um, so going back to Carl Jung, I'm going to paraphrase here again, but one of the things he said is that everybody who is on the path to individuation at some point will have to perform an antisocial act. And it's essentially, that requirement that at some point I am just going to have to do things. If I'm going to be truly free and truly give myself the opportunity to express my potentials, I'm going to have to take the risks of doing things that I know my society in general doesn't approve of in some way. And our society in general likes to tell stories about great individuality and creativity, but it doesn't really respond well to the presence of that in everyday life. And so to some extent, we have to stop identifying with society. Now, that's the ultimate group, right?
Right.
Society as a whole. But we can go too far with that, because to become completely antisocial or sociopathic, for one thing, you can't just decide to be that way. There's something much deeper and inherent about that. But it is important that we realize ultimately our union with all other human beings, and that there is a kind of greater whole that we're participating in. But we can only fully contribute to that greater whole if we activate our unique potentials as a human being. If we fully activate uh, the unique combination of experiences and strengths and innate talents that each of us has. Now, to some degree, we're all going to make compromises in that. But again, we have to have that individuated development if we're going to make our fullest contribution to society. And that's a part of happiness too. The idea of knowing that what we're doing is not only a genuine expression of who we are, but that it is actually good for others in some way.
Yeah, and I mean, I always I kind of like to look at like that process of individuation, in I guess allegorically, as you were saying about learning a new skill, right?
Mm,
Because large group of people that I've interviewed for this podcast so far have been a lot of different types of artists, right? Voice actors, painters, musicians, try and get a wide spectrum. And the one thing that they all say is that people don't want to go through the pain of
mhm.
realizing that they suck at something before they get good at it. And you know what? I kind of looked at I kind of look at myself in that regard because some days I'll just get up in the morning and I just will have no ambition to do absolutely anything. And I have to realize it's like no, I got to get up and do something because yeah, it's gonna suck. It's gonna suck for a couple hours until I actually have my coffee and get in the groove, but you got to suck at something before you can be good at it. And I feel like when it comes to developing our talents, right, those things that bring that meaning or that voice to our lives, we have to risk sucking at it before we can actually gain some value in it. Similar with individuation, right? You have to go
Yes.
through some pretty rough times and you're going to realize that yeah, you're a hypocrite and you're a coward and you're all these different things that you're going to want to project on yourself. But you know what? Going through that allows you to be more grateful for the certain things that you maybe or maybe taken for granted about yourself.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And it also gives you more compassion for the fact that other people are having the same struggles.
Yeah.
That other people are not wanting to see the ugliness in the mirror. They're not wanting to see the weakness, and the faultiness and all of those things that other people are struggling with embracing their own humanity just the way I am. And that makes it much, much easier to have a sense of compassion for them rather than a sense of judgment
Yeah.
and arrogance.
And I feel that like, that struggle with realizing our own humanity and reality is just that struggle with realizing our own faults and flaws.
Yeah. Yes. And that they're inevitable, that we're not smart enough. And we'll just stick with that. We're not smart enough to be perfect, to be flawless in the kind of idealized way that we think about perfection and flawlessness. um, I bet some of your artist friends would start to talk about how then you can start maybe to begin to realize that the things that you used to call imperfections and flaws actually create beauty, actually make it possible to do things unique and different and to be innovative. And that sometimes the things that we thought were our greatest weaknesses actually have the potential to turn into some of our most creative and creative and beautiful um, aspects of life.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as an artist myself, one of the things that, I always point to is that, you might mess up on a painting, right?
Hmm.
But once you paint over it, you may find a way to use that imperfection to bring out, some
Right.
detail that you didn't think of before. And I feel like that is just going back to that reframing, right? That's what we do with our own lives all the time. We may have had a traumatic event in the past, but if we're really working on, what we need to be working on, we're reframing those to try and redefine them as a moment of strength, something
Yes,
that something that taught us a lesson on our hero's journey as we're crossing over that threshold.
exactly. And there's a tired old adage that still has a lot of value here, and that's about making lemonade out of lemons. you know and I that because, well, for one thing, I really like lemonade. Um, but but we're going to find lemons within ourselves.
Yeah.
And what we do with them is important. Do we ignore them? Do we deny them? Do we say, "Oh, well, there's just that lemon. There's not anything I can do about it. I've just got that that bad, bitter, sour part of myself, and I can't do anything with it"? Or can we transform it in some way? And I think that a lot of those things can be transformed. That we can make lemonade out of the bitterest and sourest parts of ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, what was I think it was Marcus Aurelius that said the happiness of your life depends on the quality of your thoughts, right?
Mm,
You
yes,
you need to be focusing on the positive things in your life and the positive aspects of yourself in order to kind of counterbalance those things that you want to change, right? That I mean, I guess that's that stage, right? You're never really defeating the shadow. You're accepting it. You're embracing it. You know,
exactly.
you're forgiving it, right?
Yes.
But you know what? I think kind of going off of Marcus there, I think one of the things that people need to be able to deal with in the moment is when they have those negative self-talk or those different
Mm.
cognitive distortions that just reinforce our bitter perspective of those events.